What up? This is Rama Screen, and in the anticipation of the new adult animated series Adventure Beast premiering October 22 only on Netflix, I'm here talking with the showrunner Brian and the voice star and real life animal expert Bradley, or BTG. How are you both this afternoon?
We're doing great. BTG is doing great. I know that. I don't know about me.
Yeah, you have to remember that Brian is essentially a 6-foot Woody Allen, and a certain degree of anxiety is part of who he is.
Yeah.
Duly noted. Thank you for taking the time. Congratulations on the show. I've watched some of the episodes. Brian, let me start with you, Brian. This has got to be the wackiest adult animated show I've ever seen, and I've seen quite plenty. So take me to the genesis of all this. What inspired Adventure Beasts, especially your process of pitching this project to Netflix?
Well, I didn't pitch it. Actually, BTG pitched it. It's because,
BTG pitched it. Okay.
Yeah, BTG is a real life guy, and he's a real animal expert, and he pitched the show, and I came on much later to help develop it, and then eventually show run the series. But do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, go ahead, BTG.
Yeah. So yeah, the evolution of the show is quite fun, actually. As your fans may or may not know, I've been working in wildlife conservation and writing books about animals now for many years, and also took a lot of animals onto late night television in America. So Chelsea Handler's show, Chelsea Lately, on E! For a long time, and with Craig Ferguson on The Late Late Show, and really wanted to do something new in the space to bring a lot more humor, and also what I call real life consequences to wildlife show. As a wildlife expert who's had over 21 surgeries and 7 treatments for rabies, it annoys me when you see a wildlife show or a cartoon about animals and no one gets injured. I'm always injured. I'm always hemorrhaging from somewhere. And so we really wanted to push the envelope and have an educational show that was genuinely hilarious with great comedy, but also had the kind of facts that most other shows tiptoe around. So a friend of mine who's the animation director on this show and co-creator, Mark Gravis of Kapow Pictures in Australia, and I should mention that Brian and I are speaking to you today from Los Angeles, where we both live. He and I were on a project in Malaysia. We were consulting on an animation project in Kuala Lumpur. And he went swimming with his wife in a pool near our hotel. And a large python swam next to him and touched him and freaked him out. He came and got me. I got in the pool. I caught the snake. It was about a 7-foot reticulated python, which sounds impressive, but those species actually get to over 30 feet in length. So it was just a baby. But he just said, you know what, we should do a show based on all your wildlife adventures and all the amazing facts that you've accumulated over many decades. So that was the genesis of the show. When we finally got it up with Netflix, we needed a showrunner and who had experience. And Brian was one of the top guys at Adam Ruins Everything, which is an incredibly popular factual show. So we grabbed Brian, promoted him to showrunner so we could enjoy the stress of a huge project on his own in his new role as showrunner. And then we changed the show completely. So it was nothing like what we said it was. Instead of being a series of funny facts, it was a lot like Adam's Ruins Everything. We ended up changing the show into being basically a semi-autobiographical series of escapades about my life, an entirely independent and very funny comedy about myself and my assistant and my favorite niece, and also all these facts. So Brian was the one who was responsible for taking some very unusual ideas and bringing them together to create the curious animal that is Adventure Beast.
Well, Brian, speak more about those ideas. About the episodes that you have to run.
Well, if you talk to any writer, I think the challenge of putting real animal facts into a cohesive narrative is nearly impossible, but we did it for 12 episodes. Imagine you need to make a television show. You need to write a television. Imagine you need to write Big Mouth or The Simpsons. And they're like, oh, by the way, you can't come up with just whatever story beats you want. Your story beats need to lead you to these specific animal facts that revolve around a theme. It's a crazy process for writing a show like this. And then on top of that, when we started the show, first of all, there were no characters, but when we started the show, there was a live action portion.
That's right. God, I keep forgetting about that. That was huge.
It's still there if you look for it. But the show is an adult animated comedy with animal facts within the narrative. They're seamlessly put into the story. But also, when we first started out, we were supposed to break up the acts of the narrative story with live action segments where you see BTG in real life form as a human being interacting with real animals. And we quickly realized after shooting, we shot live action with animals. We quickly realized like this is more insane than it already is. And so now if you watch the show, you'll see the great cartoon. And then at the end, I hope still, generally there is like, you'll see like a little clip of like outtakes from the live action portion, which is pretty awesome to see BTG working with real animals, just letting people know that, you know, BTG is a real guy and he really does get, you know, bit by sharks and scorpions and trampled by new goats in real life.
That's awesome.
It's true. And the crazy thing about, we shot that near Paramount, and we had animals coming from all over California, from wildlife reserves and education facilities. And there was so many animals. Some were just microscopic insects and arachnids, through to giraffe and huge things, 1,000-pound camel that almost killed Denise. We had all these crazy animals coming in and trying to wrangle everything to shoot it. And we got through it and then 48 hours later, all productions were locked down because of COVID. That's how close we were to the wire. And yeah, some of those wonderful live action moments are secretly hidden in the show as Easter eggs. So the viewers who are binging, hang in there to the credits and you'll get rewarded.
By the way, I have to thank both of you for this show featuring, well, animation-wise, my homeland, Indonesia, Sulawesi, and even the Babi Rusa, which I'm very familiar with. I came from Indonesia. So that's really cool. Got me geeking out. So my next question for both of you, how did you guys come to decide which locations in the world that BTG, the animated BTG, will travel to, and which animals he will discuss about next?
Oh, that's an excellent question. There are two layers to this. I'll take the first one, which is derived from my actual physical experiences of doing things. So in Sulawesi, for example, even though I haven't been there, I had to cancel a trip due to I broke my shoulder and my knee. But I funded the Sulawesi forest turtle conservation program there back in the day. So through the Wildlife Conservation Society out of New York. So I have a connection to Sulawesi, and therefore we knew the animals that were there. We knew some of the people who were there. And so we try to draw as much as we can from the show from things that I've actually done or been involved with. So that's one layer to it. And I'll let Brian handle the narrative aspects.
Yeah, we try to revolve each story around a theme that is based off of a perspective that BTG as a unique animal expert might have that's different from other animal experts. So for example, a theme might be like parenthood could kill you. You know, in the wild, parenthood is very dangerous. Having babies in the wild could lead to your death. And we try to think of, through BTG's expertise, he would basically just sit there and tell us things about animals. And we'd be like, what animal would embody this theme to the nth degree? And whatever animal fit the theme the best, whatever location they were actually in, we would try to create a narrative around that location. And it's another reason why the narrative was limited, because you have to take this theme, then you have to take this animal, and you have to put this animal in a story in this location. It's a real location. All the animals you see on the show illustrated actually live in that location. You can't just say, okay, we're in Sulawesi now. How about we put a pelican? Are pelicans in Sulawesi?
Yeah, Pelicanus occidentalis, they do live there, but never mind. Your point is well made.
We're in Sulawesi. How about we put a manatee?
Yeah.
Is there a manatee in Sulawesi? No, right?
No, but you do occasionally to the south get the same family Sirenus, which is a dugong. Looks like a manatee, but it has a tail like a fish instead of like a paddle.
Okay, so you're in Sulawesi and you're like, you know, it would be a great story beat if we put a moose here.
Yeah, there's no
Someone
moose.
got trampled by a moose.
Moose free, Sulawesi.
And then BTG would come in and say, there are no moose in Sulawesi. I'm like, well, now we have to come up with a whole new storyline because we based it all around the moose.
Oh.
Exactly. And Sulawesi was a great example. I didn't know of your connection, but now I love that you are from there, because Sulawesi is one of the ecological gems of the earth. It's one of the most unusual collections of plants and animals that are very unique. And even though it's part of that, giant Indonesian archipelago, which is, the biggest in the world, there's so much diversity there. And Sulawesi has a couple of endemics that are amazing. Obviously, the babirusa, aka the deer pig, which is just a fascinating creature. And then, of course, the famous Sulawesi macaque, which features heavily in that episode. And that was actually the point of entry into that, because what I love about those macaques is that when the females are receptive for mating, they develop these inflamed rear ends. They're called ischial callocytes. And so it's just the most extraordinarily striking visual, this giant pink butt on this monkey. And so it just became a terrific departure point for when you're in love and the whole world can see it. What does it look like? Well, if you're a Sulawesi macaque or a crested black macaque, you have a giant pink and red butt. And that just became a great beginning for the episode on how difficult it is to find love, both as a human being and as an animal. And the great thing about our show is that often we make the connection between animals and human life, in that we are all really animals, and much that we fuss about our own lives, what we think only affects us. In fact, you'll see examples of that in nature that we can observe and learn from.
What I love about the animated BTG character is that he's very knowledgeable, obviously, but he has a bit of Homer Simpson to him, and so he gets clumsy, even though he knows what's about to happen if he gets clumsy. Talk to me about the designing. I mean, like, even he wears all these marsupial costumes or whatnot. Why does he have to go through such hassle, if you will?
So design of the character is interesting. In real life, I'm a big guy. I'm an ex-army paratroop commander. I'm a rugby player. I'm a rock lifting champion. So I'm a very big, strong man. The character does reflect this big burliness of it. The design by Thomas Hunter. I've never met Thomas. He doesn't know me, and now he's probably hiding from me because he made me much fatter in the animation than I am in real life, and I resent that. But it actually makes it funnier. But what they got right is not just all the animal facts are absolutely accurate, even though the stuff we tell you is extraordinary. But my big burliness and resistance to pain is terrific. That's accurate. But what is true that you've observed is I am a clumsy, clumsy bastard. And I've had 21 surgeries for injuries and accidents. I've had 7 treatments for rabies. I've had a section of my bowel cut out. I'm full of metal pins and scar tissue. And we wanted to communicate that in the show, that there is a cost for doing this kind of thing in the field. Zoologists who work in the field have a very tough life. Doesn't matter whether they work in extreme cold or extreme heat. It doesn't really matter. Animals are dangerous. Just because you love wildlife doesn't mean it loves you back. And of course, wildlife is dangerous and you're going to suffer, but that's the price that you pay. So we really wanted to get that across. And I feel like even though it's comedy, they got that accurate, because I'm not a complete idiot. I'm not super clumsy, but I get hurt all the time. Even while we were filming this show, I got stung by scorpions in the live action about half a dozen times over 4 days. That's just the nature of what the risk is if you pick up a live scorpion, whether it's for television or not. And we wanted to make sure that people realize that you can't just watch an animal show and go out there and do what I do. You have to be a professional. You have to be trained, and you got to accept a whole lot of pain and embarrassment and be able to enjoy it. And I do.
Speaking of train, and maybe Brian can chime in on this, by all accounts, Dietrich is not what you consider an outdoors person, and Bonnie can be too eager from time to time. Talk to me about the personalities of these two assistants and why they make such a good teammate for BTG.
Well, for Bonnie, that's BTG's niece, and she's the heir apparent to the Greive animal explorer expeditionist lineage. And she's overeager. She wants to take over. But but the nature of a BTG is that they frequently die early because they're constantly putting themselves in harm's way for the sake of animal research. And BTG anticipates this death, and so his own death, and so he must train Bonnie, whether she's ready or not, to take his place sooner rather than later. And Dietrich provides what we feel like is the audience's perspective. Like if you were just sitting on your couch watching this, it's like you need somebody in there to provide the reactions that you would provide if you were standing there face to face with a lion or Sulawesi macaque's big butt. You know, what would a regular person say in these situations? Because BTG is not going to act like a normal person. He's going to be so enamored by the biology of everything, and Bonnie is going to be so over enthusiastic about everything. Dietrich's the only one that if a plane is crashing, he's going to be screaming his head off that we're all about to die. Bonnie is going to be semi enjoying this, and BTG is going to be thinking about the scientific nature of the air currents around him or the types of birds that he's seeing in the sky as he's plummeting to his death. And we felt like that was a great comedy dynamic, especially when you take BTG out of the equation and you put Bonnie and Dietrich together in scenes by themselves. You have over-enthusiastic Bonnie with incredibly nervous Dietrich, and they work off of each other in a comedy dynamic way. And BTG is sort of in the middle, getting pulled one way or the other, trying to provide, you know, the sage wisdom of somebody who is more experienced than either of them. That being said, it's not like Dietrich doesn't want to be in the animal field. He wants to be in the animal field, but he wants to be a professor, specifically at UC Davis, which he says frequently throughout the series. He doesn't want to be in the field. He doesn't want to be attacked by bees. He's scared of every animal, but he does care. But that's also the history of BTG and his field assistants, is that BTGs frequently die because they're in so much danger, and their lineage goes back hundreds of years. His field assistants, they die almost every day. Yeah.
We kind of see my character as a little bit. You've watched Apocalypse now, obviously.
Yes.
You've reviewed it. Remember Colonel Kilgore? And he talks about how everyone's going to die around him, but he's going to be there surfing in a combat zone, not going to get a scratch on him. BTG is a little bit like that, except that he's getting broken legs and he's getting wounded all the time. But because he doesn't care about the pain very much, it doesn't matter. So he'll survive and the wounds don't bother him, but people around him get killed all the time. And because this is the first official interview we've done for Adventure Beast, I'll let you in on a secret about the show. The first is Bonnie's character, played by Denise Cabanella, who is, fans would know her from Dear White People. And she won the role because there were so many terrific actresses that came in for it, but she won the role because she had just this ferocious joy in the way she related to animals. And she used to have a pet snake, so she wasn't fazed by anything. And on day one of live shooting, we pull out this scorpion, one of the several that was stinging me the whole time. And she says, "Show me how to pick up a scorpion." So I'm teaching her on the set how to pick up a scorpion. I would put it to you that less than 1% of people would ask a professional to show them how to do that. And then another time we had this 1,000-pound camel. And I said, the secret to a 1,000-pound camel is, or any 1,000-pound animal, is never get in the way of where it's going. It's going to go where it's going to go, and you just let it happen. And she was so in love with this camel, who was quite gorgeous and had just been washed. It was all fluffy and looked a bit like, imagine you sort of taped 4 Chewbaccas together. This is this huge thing. And she hugs it, and it starts wandering off to get a snack and just starts dragging her along the set. And I was terrified that she was going to get crushed. But Denise's role as Bonnie, my niece, is loosely inspired by my real life favorite niece, Jessica, who was a geologist. And when she was a kid, she came to me and asked me to get her an internship at one of the zoos, the conservation zoos I support. And when I explained to her what she would have to do, it's a lot of poop shoveling, a lot of chopping up dead rats and things and preparing the ugly foods for these animals to eat. I said, you won't be brushing, unicorn manes. This is a tough job. And she said, no, I think I prefer a job with less gore and less maggots. So she went into geology. Now I adore her, but her spirit, which is kind of fearsome, but at the same time has an academic edge to it now, Bonnie is kind of inspired by that. And the secret about Dietrich is Dietrich was supposed to be one of a dozen assistants that die in every single episode. But when Brian had finished writing the pilot, everyone fell in love with Dietrich so much that Netflix didn't want to kill him off. So instead of him being just killed off in episode 1, he's now a regular part of the cast, and which is kind of funny. And we used to joke that we call this Adventure Beast, the secret title is The Dietrich Show, because he was just so beloved. He's such a funny character. So I think people are going to get a lot of laughs out of him, but it was an accident that he became this huge part of the show. And Bonnie is in fact inspired by someone in real life.
So Dietrich was initially supposed to be kind of like Kenny from South Park in the first few years.
A little bit. And you'll see in some of the episodes, some of my past assistants who have died horrible deaths in the field. He was just going to be another one of those. But Brian created Dietrich, and he's so funny that we all fell in love with him. And Josh Zuckerman, who plays Dietrich, and your fans will know him from 90210. Josh does such a funny job with this character that we love it. And Josh's voice is throughout. Yeah. He did Pyaita, the former Soviet submarine commander who now runs a hospice that just disguises a resort. He is just so good with the voices. And I just love that he brings that next level of voice character to our show.
As I'm winding down, I can't let you go, BTG, without asking you this. We aficionados of wildlife shows have always wondered, like, among all the TV, personalities out there, the late Steve Irwin, Jack Hanna, I forgot Jeff something, and Bear Grylls, of course, because Bear Grylls also handles with animals. Like, I mean, how much of that is just performative, and are they really badasses, or do you think they're just doing it for the camera? Like, can you spill the beans on that?
Well, I can tell you, I haven't met all of those guys. I met some of them. I met Sir David Attenborough. I didn't meet Steve Irwin, but I've been to his facility and met with his people a number of times before he died. It varies. Jeff Corwin is probably more of a teacher and a performance guy.
Yes.
Sir David Attenborough truly came through. His whole career was an accident. He was actually behind the camera and had to fill in on one day, and ended up doing well and became the most iconic wildlife presenter of all time. I've met him. He's just a gentle, lovely, truly interesting man who, even though he's very elderly now, is still passionately curious about wildlife and wild places. So he's definitely a presenter type. Even though I didn't meet Steve Irwin personally, I have met his family. He was truly unique. He really is, in every definition, a real badass. He was, because his whole passion was hands-on, and the mantra for his Australia Zoo and his conservation programs is wildlife. What was it? It was conservation through exciting education. So he really wanted to get out there and do it. And it was his wife and another friend who talked him into doing a television show, even if he'd never done it. The TV show that made him famous, Crocodile Hunter, and the movies and so forth. He would, had he still been with us, be wrestling crocodiles to this day. And I remember watching him. It's the little things that impress you when you really do it and you know what you're looking for. It's not the grabbing the snake and the stuff like that. When you know how to do it, you know how to do it. It's watching him charge through a giant field of thorny brambles and wait a while to grab a rat or something like that. And you go, yeah, that's the real thing. Because we can all stand in front of a camera and hold something and smile and say something quasi-intelligent, but it's the punishment you have to absorb to get to that moment that separates the amateurs from the professionals. And Steve Irwin was definitely emblematic of the kind of toughness that I admire in the field.
All right, thank you for sharing that. And finally, I mean, I'm sure conservation is part of the objective of this show. I mean, talk to me about the themes and the goals of what you hope audiences will take away from watching Adventure Beasts. Let's start with you, Brian, and then we end with BTG.
Well, I just want to comment on the last question that is something we actually touch on in one of the episodes of the show. The character BTG has an arch nemesis on the show who is this type of, I would call him like a Snapchat or TikTok animal presenter who fakes certain things, doesn't give entire facts, has all this gear, and doesn't go out, is not a badass, doesn't go out in the field. And BTG kind of loathes him because he's always getting his ass kicked by animals constantly for the sake of conservation. So we do touch on that. It's an interesting dynamic that you bring up, because it does at least from what I learned from BTG, is that it does vary widely across all the different experts. But BTG, BTG probably wouldn't say this about himself because it would be bragging, but he is definitely a badass. I've seen, if you watch any of his shows, he like drinks blood. Like the first day, we've had to push. He was also in the army and he was a paratrooper, and he's a supreme badass. We've had to push meetings because he needed to get injections for his various injuries. He's constantly in pain and suffering because he has actually put his body on the line for his entire life to do things that I would say most people wouldn't even dream of. And I do remember, like, one of the first days on in the writer's room, we had this writer's room and it kind of smelled weird. And I was like, this writer's room, it smells weird. There's something about it. BTG, without even blinking, he somehow climbs up the wall and looks over the roof, and he analyzes the situation. He says, yeah, this building is filled with rat feces. And that's just the type of guy he is. And then he like jumps down through the ceiling, and we're like, where did you just go? And he's like, well, I just discovered the cause of the smell that you're all complaining about. And then we switched buildings. But that's the type of guy that BTG is. And then I answered the previous question, and I forgot your next.
The objective.
The conservation objective.
Conservation, yeah. I mean, part of the goal is to bring attention to some of these endangered species, but I think the number one objective of the show is to present BTG's point of view of wildlife to the world, and that it is not all just what you see on Animal Planet television shows. BTG will speak to this better than me, but nature is dirty, and it is filled with blood and poop and piss, and other shows tend to ignore that stuff. And what we do on Adventure Beast is we give the facts that you would not hear on regular animal shows. We give the real scoop.
Absolutely. No, Brian's right. One of the things that frustrates me about a lot of wildlife television, and I'm not going to tie anybody particularly, but off air, they know I hate them. And that's that, you can tell someone's doing a real expedition because they discover unexpected things along the way. And it's fake when someone says, we're just going to find this particular animal, and they just find it. That's not how it really is. So, and that's why a lot of cryptid stuff with Bigfoot and whatever is just nonsense. I spent 6 years studying giant bears in Alaska. I saw a ton of things that were not giant bears. So if you go out in the field, truly, with a camera crew on your own, you're going to find amazing things. So I hope in a broad sense, we encourage an appetite for adventure and discovery without sugarcoating the fact that it is going to be messy and painful. And that's the price you pay, and the price is worth it to go to the edge of the world and see what's really out there. The broader conservation message is I'm not an extremist. I don't want to ram anything down people's throats. I certainly want to try to live by example. And the main example I want to get across is there's a reason I get excited about this. If you just make the effort to go out there, open your eyes and see what's out there, you will know that it's worth protecting. If you don't, people can't afford to travel around the world. Even before the pandemic, it was difficult to travel to some of the places where we're from. You're from Indonesia, which is an incredible ecological hotspot. I'm from Tasmania, which is this extraordinary unspoiled island at the end of the world. Brian's from New Jersey, from New York rather, and no one cares about him. But there are plenty of places out there that are difficult to get to, but well worth it. And our show, I hope, whets that appetite, and at the same time takes away the filters that prevent people from knowing the truth about wildlife and wild places. We don't look through a religious lens. We don't care what faith you are. We don't look through a political lens. We don't care where you come from. We're only interested in showing you what's truly there. All of our facts are real, and we're not going to sugarcoat the things that are ugly, because I believe that there's nothing in this world that is beautiful that is not also ugly, and there's nothing in the wild world that's ugly that is not also beautiful, and this show celebrates that.
All right, for my fans at home, everybody go check out Adventure Beast, animated series premiering October 22, only on Netflix. Brian and Bradley, BTG, thank you for talking to me, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Cheers, Rama. Thanks for having us. And everyone, it's worldwide. Everybody gets the show at the exact same minute. There's no streaming imperialism. Doesn't matter whether you're in Sulawesi or Hobart, Tasmania, or God forbid in New York with Brian. Everybody gets it at exactly the same time. Enjoy Adventure Beast. Thank you, Rama, for having us on.